So welcome to this video on using Adobe Camera Raw. So we're going to use Adobe Camera Raw to edit this image here, and it's going to end up looking something similar to this. So this is that same image that has been edited earlier. So this is a raw file produced by Sony A7R Mark II. So we're going to go just double click on this. And the image will open up in Adobe Camera Raw. Okay, so now we have the image open in Adobe Camera Raw. We can start adjusting the settings here. You can see at the moment it's a little bit dark in areas, there's no detail, so you know, if I wanted to make a print or something of this, it would come out quite dark. You know, this is almost pure black, so there's very little detail. So we want to reveal a little bit of detail. So in order to do that, I'm just going to start by cropping the image. So I just want to work with what the area of the image that we're going to work with. So I'm just going to get it so that the horizon is just kind of resting on this, this bottom third. So and when I go back to my editing tools, we'll see the newly cropped image. So I'm going to increase my exposure. I want to as well just to lighten my shadows, so I'm grabbing back some detail in these areas, and you can see within the file there's quite a nice detail still within these heavy shadows. I'm also going to use my Dehaze Tool and my clarity slider here. So these two sliders are really useful for kind of grabbing back detail, especially the Dehaze one, which will reduce the effect of haze on any of your photographs, and that helps to kind of bring the color back out and also the details back out. So we're getting the nice details. For instance, we see here we're getting the details of the sky back by increasing the dehaze. I'm also going to just turn down my whites a little bit just to make sure there's going to be good detail here, but also for the fact that I don't want very strong highlights in this, because I want it to look like an image that was shot in very low light. So I want I don't want bright highlights or shadows apart from these areas where we have these lights. I want these to stand out, and I also want to add more drama to the sky. So looking at the sky then and adding more drama to it, we're going to use the masking tools in Adobe Camera Raw, which have not been around for so long. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a mask for the sky that's going to separate the sky from the foreground. And to do that, I just click on Select Sky. Now this is a relatively big digital file, so it will take a moment, and that will also depend on the power of your computer as well. It may take longer depending on what type of video processor you have. So now the sky is selected, and you can see that's shown to us with this red mask, and we can start making adjustments that will only affect the sky. You can see that some of the tops of the buildings are marked in red, so they also have been part of the selection. So we'll see how much our adjustment affects them, and we'll see if we need to add further masks to try and if anything detrimental happens to the tops of these buildings. But let's see how it goes. So the first thing I want to do is reduce the exposure on the sky, because I want it to look darker. I'm going to go up here and again do a further dehaze and a clarity, because I want to add drama to the sky as well, and that looks pretty good to me. Another thing I want to do is I want to add a second mask to this, so I can go to create new mask, and the second mask, I want to brighten these lights a little bit. I want to make them brighter, so I'm just going to use the brush tool for this. So now I have a second mask and I have a brush. So in order to change, you can change the size of your brush using these sliders here. You can also use keyboard shortcuts. So normally on a keyboard it would be the square bracket keys that you use for reducing the size and increasing the size of your brush. And you can also change the feather size. So at the moment it's at 100%, so maybe for this I'm just going to use 50 for the feather. The flow is at 35, so the flow, if you think about it, if you have a pen or a brush, then that reduces the amount of flow. At 100%, the brush will give you 100% if you're using black, but at 35% we're slightly reducing it, and maybe I'll use about, I think 45 is okay for this. And I'm going to zoom into 100% so I can see exactly what I'm changing. I'm going to just change these by stroking along this line, but before I do that I want to kind of at least visually see how it's changing. So I'm just going to bump my exposure up by 2 stops and then click and hold the mouse button, and then I can kind of see what's happening as I'm doing that. And the feather acts because I want a little glow around the light, so I want to glow around these edges, and that's what the feather will give me. And then the reduced flow will make sure that the strength isn't 100%, because if I have the flow at 100%, it probably won't look so realistic. So I'm just going over this kind of once or twice, and you can see the change if we remove the mask. So if I disable, that's the wrong mask, if I disable this mask and enable it, you can see the kind of before and after. So I'm going to press the space bar, so that allows me to kind of move around the image with this hand, and I'm going to just reduce the brush size for these ones. So just go up and down, so that's going over it. And then we've got some over here in the distance. So I'm going to get a bit closer to this. So I'm at 100% at the moment, so I'm just Control plus to get me a little bit closer so I can be more accurate with this. Now, and then we go Control, or we just can hit fit down here to get it to fit in. You can see I've gone over in some spots, so in the mask here, so if I go back to 100%, if I want to clean these up, so if you hold down the Alt key, that will give you this brush that allows you to remove it, but you need to change, so I need to change my brush size. So I'm going to press Alt, and I'm pressing the square bracket key, and I want to just fix this so it's not going over or incurring into the sky. And you can fix any other areas where it's gone over. But let's see now, if I go back to fit, and I'm happy with that. We can see before and after. So by clicking on the eye up here, that's for my overall masking, but you can do it on the individual masks by clicking on the eye next to it. So you can see before and after. So it just gives the lights that little bit of a glow, makes them more noticeable. So now I've made my adjustment using my masks to the sky and to these small buildings in the foreground. I'm going to go back to my edit details, and I'm going to actually reduce the exposure a little bit, just to give it that feeling of a kind of lower light, but still I want a little bit of detail to remain. If I increase it too much, it's going to get this too much of a feel like these high dynamic range images, and I don't want it to do that, but I want some kind of drama in the sky and some of the foreground detail and in these trees to be visible. So this is pretty much the final edit. So we've gone through, we've changed our exposure. I haven't changed the contrast, but you can lift it up a little bit to give it more contrast. I've changed my highlights, so I've dimmed the highlights down because I don't want bright highlights or bright whites in these buildings in the background where you can kind of see the sun has been starting to rise a little bit, but I wanted to mute them down because I don't want any bright lights apart from the lights on these three buildings. And then I've also increased my clarity and my dehaze value in order to get the details back in the sky and the other textures in the image. We've also then added two masks, so we added the mask for these lights to get them brighter. We brightened them by 2 stops, and then we added a mask for the sky to get that added drama into the sky, because if you remember, the original image didn't have very much drama in the sky. While the clouds were there, it was looking pretty flat. So the last thing that we want to do is if I go to my heal tools, you can see I've got a little bit of dust on my sensor when I was taking this shot. So again, using these brush tools, so the square bracket keys, to reduce the brush size, I can just come in here and make sure I've got heal as my tool type chosen, and then just click on this area, and then it will remove this little patch of dust. And I've also got a little one here as well. So now that's removed these kind of dust patches. So that's editing a raw image using customized settings and masking and the healing brush tool and cropping in Adobe Camera Raw. And once that is edited, if you want to do further editing, you can in Photoshop, although I think these days Adobe Camera Raw covers quite a lot in terms of what you can do in editing, so there's less than what you would have had to do in Photoshop to do, as you can now do much more in Adobe Camera Raw, which is a good thing, because within Adobe Camera Raw you're working with the raw camera data. You're not necessarily working with an image file, so don't think of this as an image file, but the data that your sensor recorded when you took the photograph. So you're changing those values, those exposure values of that data. So it will help you get a much better image to work with when you bring it into Photoshop or whatever other editing software you like to use. So I'm going to click on done here, and that will save my settings, as we'll see in Bridge here. So we see our image now in Bridge saved. So did we get it pretty much the same, as a bit more drama in the sky in this one. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for watching.